Hi, I'm David Farland. Today we're going to talk a little bit about writing. I'm going to talk about style. When you start thinking about style, what I'm talking about is the way that you construct your sentences, the words that you use, the way that you punctuate them so that you create imagery, the way that you emphasize certain words or the repetition of words so that you create an emotional effect. A lot of people, when they first start out writing, a lot of people are pretty blind to style. They don't recognize that information can be conveyed particularly well. A lot of people are kind of tone deaf, and that's okay. The truth is that your story is more important than your style. In other words, most bestsellers aren't particularly great stylists. However, if you want to write powerfully, then I think you need to start looking at stylistic elements of your story. There's a lot of different ways to describe writing, to describe someone's prose style. For example, sometimes I'll pick up a piece and I'll think, oh, that's mighty clunky, or it seems to ramble, or sometimes I'll read it and I'll go, this person has no ear. They don't hear the music of language and they're just not aware of it. However, I think that when I start looking for style, there's a number of things that I look at. I'm looking for economy, I think, first of all. Economy is when you write a story and you make sure that you tell it in as few words as possible. Now, writing as few words as possible isn't necessarily the goal. If you write your story in as few words as possible, you're probably going to lose power. You're not going to create strong emotions, for example. And so writing economically alone is not the ultimate goal. It's just one thing to be aware of. Sometimes you'll find stories that are just not economical because there are too many repetitious scenes or the scenes are too long. Aldous Budrus, my mentor, was one of the great literary critics of the 20th century. And very often I would find a story in Writers of the Future and he would say, that's a good story. He'd say, but I've seen it done more economically. I've seen it done in 3,000 words instead of 7. And he's kind of right. I would argue with him on it because sometimes I would look at the story that was 3,000 words and I'd think, yeah, it does have the same theme. It covers the same kind of material, but at the same time, it's not anywhere nearly as emotionally powerful as this story is. So I don't want to cut out scenes or cut out words in order to make a story economical and do it at the expense of the power of the prose. So you're playing a little game when you're cutting. However, there's some basic rules that I have. First basic rule is don't repeat information. If you say something once or twice in a story, the average intelligent person is going to get it. Okay? So if you've got a scene, for example, where your characters meet up with Trollocs on page 27, and you're trying to show that Trollocs are a danger, and then we have roughly the same kind of scene on page 92 and again on page 127, you're probably overdoing it. Okay? You're unnecessarily cluttering your story. So make sure that you're not repeating information too much. On a sentence level, when I'm going through a story, I like to look at the sentences and say, okay, you told me, for example, that a bright light was shining in the room. You probably don't need to tell me in 2 other places in the same paragraph that there was a bright light shining in the room. One mention is good enough, but we want to find the best mention, the most powerful mention, the one that's most evocative. And so I look for powerful descriptive language when someone is writing descriptions and say, okay, use this one, not that one. The other thing that people do is they just use unnecessary words that clutter up a story. Here's my key for cutting words. When I'm trying to cut words, very often I look and say, what words can I cut? Can I cut an entire word or a phrase? If the meaning is completely understandable without a phrase, then you can go ahead and cut it. For example, if I say he shrugged his shoulders, well, there's no other body part that you shrug. Okay? You always shrug your shoulders. So he shrugged. That works just fine. Or if I say he touched his shoes with his finger. Okay, well, if you're going to reach down and touch your shoes, you're probably going to do it with your finger rather than your nose. So most of the time you can look for ways that you can write more economically. But I try to take it further. I try to go down to the level of syllables. How few syllables can I use in this sentence? For example, if you say he arched an eyebrow, well, we know if you say he arched a brow, it's the same as saying an eyebrow. Guess what? I just got rid of one syllable. So I do what I call syllabic editing. I cut as many syllables as I can without losing the power of the story and without losing the natural voices of characters. If I can do that, then I'm going to be making my story economical. Interestingly enough, when my story is economical, it's easy to make it more powerful. In other words, I can pack in more imagery. I can pack in an awful lot more internal thought and dialogue and other interesting things once I've gotten rid of all of the clutter.